Minnesota Representative Jim Nash, another Republican wimp. Guys, come on in. We got a story to talk about today. This is stuff that the legislators don't want you to know. This is the stuff that people don't want you to see. This is the stuff that goes on in the background that the legislature and their friends desperately try to keep out of the public eye, and that's why we're talking about it today. We have a story for you. It's a very important one, and this story itself is breaking all over the internet. This story today is from the deplorable housewives of the Midwest. Many of you guys know them. They're basically like Donald Trump's ladies. They're fantastic. They do good work. And they were drawing attention to a Star Tribune article. Star Tribune, come on. Written in jointly by our Secretary of State Steve Simon and Representative Jim Nash. If you guys have been following Minnesota gun rights for any length of time, we've talked about Jim and his business dealings in the past, and we're going to do that again today. Guys, what this article is about, well, I'll just kick it off right here. It says, in the Star Tribune editorial, Republican Jim Nash teamed up with Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon to give credence to the claim that the Russians tried to hack state elections in 2016. Yes, you heard that right. Our own Republican Representative Jim Nash from Carver is claiming that the Russians were trying to hack Minnesota's elections back in 2016. Now, it's a long article where they go on and on about cybersecurity, and so the deplorable housewives of the Midwest are understandably very unhappy with Representative Nash. Now, we've had a lot of dealings with him. He sells himself as a pro-gun champion, has for a long time. But gun owners know the truth, and we're going to tell you the truth right now. So here we have Jim Nash is teaming up with Steve Simon to make it, of course, a bipartisan venture, right? So bipartisanly, both Republicans and the Democrats believe in Russian collusion and Donald Trump trying to rig the elections with the Russians to steal the election. Now, they're claiming that because Hillary won Minnesota, well, they were able to rebuff the Russians and Donald Trump, and we were able to stop them from interfering with our elections process. It's out of control. You won't even believe it. So I'm not going to read this whole article. In fact, you can go check it out. Just Google deplorable housewives of the Midwest, and there it is. Minnesota Representative Jim Nash, another Republican wimp. And now, guys, now I'm a guy, right? I'm a guy, and it's easy for me, one guy to another. I can look at Jim Nash and go, he's a wimp, right? I look at him, he's a wimp. Maybe he's not that much of a wimp, but he's at least somewhat of a wimp. It's pretty easy for guys do that all the time. I mean, I'm just like everybody else. You guys know how this all works, and but this entire article is written by Minnesota women. They're the deplorable housewives of the Midwest. The women are calling Jim Nash a wimp, an absolute wimp. And of course, Minnesota women, they are the strongest in the entire country. We have the best women in Minnesota by far. You have to be to survive in this cold tundra. But Karen says, Jim Nash, what district? I believe it's 47A. I think it's 47A. It's in Carver. So the women have to call Jim Nash a wimp, which is exactly what he is. This here is it's like his bicep. It's his bicep. He is a lot of a wimp. Maybe not completely a wimp, but a lot of a wimp. And what's more, I'm just going to talk to you guys about Jim, what our experience has been with him, and how he has personally been just stopping the fight for stand your ground law and constitutional carry for a long time. He's one of the House leadership. He's one of Kurt Dowd's best friends in the Minnesota legislature. He's part of the leadership team in St. Paul. And as one state senator told me, I was having a conversation with a senator not too long ago. He said, and I'll never forget it. I was cracking up so much. He said, Jim Nash always tries to act like he's the smartest the smartest man in the room, but he's really not. Jim Nash, and of course you can see that on him. He's a wimp. He tries to be kind of a know-it-all player, but as this senator so aptly put it, he tries to pretend that he's the smartest man in the room, and he really is not. So that senator at least knows a wimp when he sees one, as these women from the deplorable housewives of the Midwest understand about Jim Nash. So he's not the smartest man in the room unless he's really the only man in the room. That's kind of how it works for Jim. And so again, he pretends to be pro-gun. And I just want to walk through. Now, Jim Nash, every single year, almost every year, this guy sponsors Stand Your Ground and constitutional carry law in Minnesota. You wouldn't hardly believe it. How could I be sitting here saying that a guy who sponsors the pro-gun bills that we want passed, how could he possibly be stopping this gun control or this pro-gun legislation? Well, we've talked about this before, and if you haven't seen it, there's a video tagged on top of this one in the description. You can go back and watch the video. If you've already seen it, you know what I'm about to talk about here. Jim Nash works very closely with the other fake gun groups here in Minnesota, and they are fake, and they sponsor pro-gun legislation simply to be able to say that they are sponsors of the legislation. They have no intention of actually moving pro-gun legislation. Never does. They never push for it. And so coming into 2017, we knew this was going to be a huge fight for Stand Your Ground law, and Jim Nash was the first person to sponsor the bill so that he could let the bill die. Well, how is he allowed to do that if he's such good friends with the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus? And how does Jim Nash, how does this guy feel like he has some authority on Russian collusion in Minnesota? How can he sit here and pretend that our cybersecurity stopped Donald Trump from stealing the Minnesota election? I mean, it's almost too much to wrap your brain around. But as these women have put it, Jim Nash is a wimp, and so we can wrap our brains around that very easily. Well, here's the thing. Now, we talked about this before. I want to talk about this one more time here. This goes all the way back to Brian Strasser, Rob Dorr, and the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. He feels, and there's a direct relationship between Jim Nash and his good friends at the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. You see, Brian Strasser owns a kind of a sham company called Bright Path LLC, and now with that company, he pretends to do crisis management on a national level. So if you have a national problem, he has some crisis management techniques that he can somehow use here. And now, what on earth does Jim Nash have to do with Brian Strasser and Bright Path LLC? Well, this is all going to tie together right here, folks, because as we pointed out before, Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus and their PAC, the Minnesota Gun Owners PAC, raise large amounts of money every elections season from gun owners all across Minnesota, give money to this PAC to help support pro-gun candidates. And this money gets funneled straight from that PAC, and all the proof is in the video we put on top of this. We've walked through this before. And that money gets funneled right into the coffers of Bright Path LLC, this disaster management company that is owned by Brian Strasser, who is the chairman of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus. Well, you know what? Jim Nash is the director of business management, a sitting state representative who pretends to be pro-gun, is the director of business management for a company that is owned by the chairman of the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, Bright Path LLC, and direct PAC money is going straight into Bright Path LLC. And we don't know, is it going right into Jim Nash's pockets? It's certainly going into Brian Strasser's pockets. And so we feel that, of course, is probably how Jim Nash feels, that he has some sort of idea on Russian collusion. And so clearly Jim has come around. And I don't know, is he a never Trumper? He could be. He could be. I mean, if you're still talking the far left's talking points about Russian collusion and Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin trying to rig our American elections, can you make this stuff up? I don't know if you can make this stuff up. I couldn't. And I got a pretty active imagination, but I couldn't come up with a story like this. It's all online. You can read it for yourself. Of course, when we first broke this story, no sooner had we told Minnesotans the truth about the nefarious relationship between Brian Strasser, Rob Dorr, and the Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus, and Jim Nash, when all of a sudden, if you hop on Bright Path LLC's website, they took down any mention of Jim Nash. They took his picture off their website, and they quickly used their crisis management expertise to scrub their own website of anything that would mention Wimp Nasty Nash off of their website. So this is the stuff that's going on here. You see now the circular pattern of this. They introduce pro-gun bills. They let the bills die. The Minnesota Gun Owners Caucus protects their guy, right? Because they're in business together. They're in bed together. Hopefully, just in a financial sense, but. You know, and this is what's happening, and gun owners pay the price. Gun owners pay the price. And now Jim Nash comes out with radicals saying that there was Russian collusion, and we're trying to stop Russia from interfering in our Minnesota elections. And he's fully against Donald Trump, which of course doesn't surprise any of us, does it? Because of course. It's our own Speaker of the House, Kurt Dowd, is also a never Trumper. He didn't vote for Trump. He was attacking Donald Trump in the media during the 2016 elections. But of course, once gun owners brought heat down on Kurt Dowd, now just a couple weekends ago, he's down in Rochester begging for a shout out from our great president. Begging for a shout out, please. I'm having such a hard time here. Minnesotans know that I'm a never Trumper piece of junk. And so, of course, Kurt Dowd was down there trying to get his shout out from our president. And so it wouldn't surprise us a bit, not even a tiny little bit, if Jim Nash is himself a never Trumper. As the deplorable housewives of the Midwest pointed out, he is a wimp. And he wrote this article with our Secretary of State, saying that they were trying to stop Russian collusion and Russian interference in our Minnesota elections. Guys, this is Representative Jim Nash to a T, and this is the game that they're playing on gun owners. He introduces pro-gun bills, and then he sits on them, and he sits on them, and he sits on them, and they never move, and they never move, and they never move because, hey, he's part of House leadership. He's one of Kurt Dowd's good friends. They have no intention of moving pro-gun bills. But of course, now it's election time. Now Jim Nash gets to walk around his district and knock on everybody's doors, and they go, "Are you pro-gun?" And he can go, I'm the sponsor. I sponsor Stand Your Ground law. We've been fighting real hard for it. And he can do that year after year after year. And then they push money and they raise money for their PAC, which goes into their business. And that, of course, is all being run by Brian Strasser, which hardly anybody sees. But you know what? And this is kind of the word amongst gun owners. I mean, they don't call him Sticky Finger Strasser for nothing, because that guy has got his hands in every gun rights pie, trying to capitalize on it for himself, not for you. He has a total political agenda, but the agenda is not for you. It's for himself. It's for Representative Jim Nash. It's for Speaker Kurt Dowd. And you wonder why we never get pro-gun bills passed in Minnesota. You wonder why Stand Your Ground law doesn't get passed. It's because of people like Nasty Nash, Sticky Fingers Brian Strasser, and Gelding Doubt, a triplet of spineless fools who are incapable of actually passing pro-gun legislation because they don't care. Because they don't care. If they did, they would light up the caucus. They would light this state on fire, and they would pass pro-gun legislation and follow through on their campaign promises for gun owners. And you know what? If you're going to run a gun rights organization, at least try to get pro-gun legislation passed. It doesn't do us any good. It doesn't do us any good if bills get introduced, if they won't push the bills out of committee onto the House and Senate floor and get this stuff passed. Get this stuff passed for gun owners. Instead, we have, as our great Minnesota women have pointed out, I'll show this another time. You can't show it enough times. Minnesota Representative Jim Nash, another Republican wimp, is what the guy is. He's an absolute wimp. And I've seen this. I mean, I've bumped into him. I've talked to him many times at the Capitol, and he's always kind of, oh, well, you guys aren't very nice, and I'm pro-gun, and don't you see my pictures? I wear blaze orange and carry shotguns in all my Facebook photos. Don't you see how pro-gun I am? No, we don't. We don't. What we do see is a whole bunch of gun owners' money going into your personal pocket through Brian Strasser and Rob Doerr's sham PAC, personal fundraiser that they call the Minnesota Gun Owners PAC, and that money is being shoveled into your pocket through Bright Path LLC. The stuff is all online, folks. You can look at it yourself. Unless through Sticky Finger Strasser's expertise, he has learned how to scrub that stuff from the internet as well. And now Jim Nash, in order to earn more points with the radical left, is up there talking about Russian collusion and Russian interference in our Minnesota elections. So go look up that article I'm talking about. Just Google deplorable housewives of the Midwest. They're fantastic ladies. They're the strongest ladies, far stronger than most of the men in the legislature. I think most is being too generous, probably all. But it says here, in a Star Tribune editorial, Republican Jim Nash from 47A teamed up with Minnesota Secretary of State Steve Simon to give credence to the claim that the Russians tried to hack state elections in Minnesota. Unbelievable. You can't make this stuff up. But you know what? This is the way of these people in St. Paul. This is the way. They think that if they play patty cakes with the left, and this is happening in Minnesota more than any other state in the nation right now, our Republican Party, our legislators in St. Paul think that the best way for them personally to advance politically is if they're friends with anti-gunners. If we can just get a bunch of leftists as our friends, then we will succeed here. So we had a dozen Republican legislators or more sponsoring gun control in 2018. They sponsored gun control. Dozens of gun control bills introduced in 2018. The Republicans were sponsoring them, hoping that they were not going to get their butts kicked in the midterms, which are coming up here in just like 3.5 weeks. You know what happened? You know what's happened? I'm talking like Cindy Pugh, for example. Now, here's a person who pretends to be pro-gun, who introduced gun control, but she's still getting her butt kicked by the left. She tries to placate the enemy, the radical, America-hating left, and hoping to get some free pass. Instead, all she did is tick off the members and supporters of Minnesota gun rights. She angered all of the gun owners in her own district, and the left is still attacking her. The left is still going after her hog wild for being a pro-gun champion, if only. And she's still getting her teeth kicked in by the left. Wouldn't it just be better, Jim Nash, Kurt Doubt, Cindy Pugh, you gun groups, the other gun groups, wouldn't it just be better to stand up like men and women, because here we're having a fantastic showing by the women with this article right here. Fantastic showing by the Minnesota women. Wouldn't it just be better if you went to war on behalf of gun owners and passed this stuff? Pass this stuff. Oh no, and one more thing about Pixie Cindy Pugh, because she's a little pixie, and she, I'm pro-gun and I'm all these things. Now, Cindy Pugh, I just want to give you one more little inside tip on her. Now, she did co-sponsor constitutional carry for us one time. And you know what she did? She turned right around and she struck her name off of the constitutional carry bill. She put her name on it, and then she took it off. She took it off. So how is that? How is that for gun rights leadership? Says she's pro-gun, and instead strikes her name off constitutional carry, abandoning gun owners when we needed her most. When we needed her most. We're not okay with that, folks. We're not okay with Jim Nash's nasty dealings. His nasty dealings with Sticky Fingers Strasser, with Speaker Kurt Doubt, who's continued to kill all of our pro-gun bills, and now he's sitting here saying that there's been that they've been fighting Russian collusion in Minnesota. Fighting Russian collusion? Are you out of your minds? Russian interference, Jim Nash says. Russian interference is what they've been stopping, and now what's he want to do? If I read this right, he wants to raise a bunch of money. Taxpayers, you guys will pay for it, to help reinforce our cybersecurity, to stop Russia and Donald Trump from meddling in our elections in the future. It's absolutely unbelievable. Unbelievable. I couldn't make this stuff up. I could not make this stuff up. So we want to thank the ladies at Deplorable Housewives of the Midwest. They've been doing some great work here in Minnesota. Strong women, the strongest, because only the strongest call this stuff. Iris Johnson says, "Are you a Dem?" No. Are you anti-gun, Iris? Because what we're doing here is pointing out a bunch of radicals who pretend to be pro-gun, who have been attacking gun rights, attacking stand your ground law and constitutional carry, who are attacking our president, who are trying to call fair elections Russian collusion. What we're doing here is drawing attention to the fact that the Republican Party, or I should say, our majorities. We have the majority in the House and the Senate. The majority in the House and the Senate have not followed through for gun owners. They have not delivered on a single pro-gun bill, not one. They haven't so much as had a vote in either chamber. The House has not voted on a pro-gun bill. The Senate has not voted on a single pro-gun bill since they got their majorities. And now, what do we got? We're just weeks away now from the midterms, and we could end up with a Democrat House. We could end up with a Democrat Senate. There's a special election happening right now. So look what we got, folks. Look what we got for our majorities in St. Paul. We got bupkis. We got zero. We got nothing. We got nothing, which is also, like I said, the size of Jim Nash's bicep. Not good. Not good. Gun owners deserve better, and you deserve the truth. The truth is that Jim Nash is over here playing patty cake with the left, another Republican wimp. He's playing patty cake with the left, doing what one state senator told me is pretending that he's the smartest man in the room, and he's not the smartest man in the room. Instead, he's been kicking in the teeth of gun owners by playing this game. Because you know what happens? Gun owners every year, and we're supposed to do this, we say, where is stand your ground law? Who's introducing it? Who's pushing it? What do we have to do as grassroots gun owners to get this stuff passed? What do we got to do? That's the question. And every year, gun owners who don't know Jim Nash's past, they don't know his history, they don't know what he's currently doing to kick in the teeth of gun owners. Instead, they say, hey, I'm introducing the pro-gun bill. I'm introducing stand your ground. I'm introducing constitutional carry. That's what Jim Nash tells everybody. That's what The legislature tells everybody, and then they say, we got this. We got this under control. Gun owners, you can go home. When the time is right, we'll get it passed. And so people like Jim Nash end up being some of the worst in the legislature, because what they do is placate gun owners. As they say, hey, we got this under control. We're your friends. We're your friends, don't you know? And then they kill the bill, and they kill the bill, and they kill the bill. And it's all because of Tiny Biceps Nash. He's a wimp. He's a wimp. The women of Minnesota have spoken, and they know what we all know, and that is that Jim Nash is a wimp. Again, I'm a guy. I think that about a lot of wimps who I see, Jim Nash included, but the women now have to call out Nash for what he is, and that is he's just another Republican wimp. What we want is real leadership in St. Paul. We want somebody to stand up and say, to heck with the Democrats, to heck with the Republicans. I'm here for grassroots. I'm here for Minnesota citizens. I'm here for the voters. I'm here to pass stand your ground law. I am here to pass constitutional carry law. I am going to follow through. I'm going to fight like a mad dog, like a street brawler, and we're going to get stand your ground law for the people of Minnesota. That's all we want to see. That's all. We want to see a fighter. We want to see a fighter like our president. He's a fighter. He's a fighter. He's been fighting the left and the right, and he's been doing what many, many, many Americans want him to do. That's all we ask from people like Jim Nash and Kurt Doubt. That's all we ask from these people, is to stand up and actually pass pro-gun bills, because you know what? It's not bad politics. It's good politics. It's good politics. See, they don't want to pass pro-gun bills because they think that it'll go badly for them at election time. They think, oh my gosh, if I vote for stand your ground law, then the anti-gun groups are going to come after me. Reality check for any of you candidates watching this who didn't already figure it out, they're already coming after you. You could have voted for universal background checks, red flags, gun seizures, and every other gun control bill under the sun, and they're still going to come after you as a pro-gun representative. They're still going to try to run you out of office. So why don't you do your job, fire up your own base by passing pro-gun legislation so that your people have a reason to go to the polls, folks. It is a fatal mistake of many of our current majority members. They have made a fatal mistake, and that is to stick a shiv in the ribs of gun owners, to side with the radical left, hoping to get a free pass, and instead, all they have done is ignite the left to try to kick them out of office, and infuriated gun owners on the right and given them no reason to go to the polls. Terrible, terrible, terrible. And Tiny Biceps Nash, Jim Nash, he's a wimp. The women know it. The women know it. He's been pwned by the deplorable women of Minnesota, one comment says. He's been pwned by the deplorable women of the Midwest. And they know the truth, and that is that Jim Nash is playing patty cakes. Now he's talking about Russian collusion and about Donald Trump trying to interfere with the 2016 elections. Are you a Republican or a Democrat? Are you on the right or are you on the left? Nash, make up your mind. But again, what we do know is that he has been killing off the pro-gun legislation with Speaker Doubt for a long time, for a very long time, and pocketing money with his friends, Sticky Fingers, Brian Strasser, and Rob Dorr, who run their fundraiser, the Minnesota Gun Owners PAC, and they've been pocketing PAC money for years, and not pushing for pro-gun legislation. This stuff is all true, folks. I'm not making any of it up. If I was, you could come back and say that I was, but I'm not. All of this stuff, again, if you want to see it, if you want to see the paperwork, it's all online. But it's also in a video on top of this video in the description. You can see exactly what we're talking about here, where the money goes and Jim Nash's dealings. So he gets protected. He gets protected by the other gun rights groups. And you know, here he can play these games with the radical left and accuse our president of Russian collusion and of Russians trying to meddle in our Minnesota elections. It's out of control. It's unbelievable. Google it, folks. But this is what's happening. So when Jim Nash, guys, if you live in House District 47A, if you live in Jim Nash's district, when he sits there and looks you square in the face and says, I introduced stand your ground law. I introduced constitutional carry law. I'm pro-gun. Remember what you just heard here today. He's a never-Trumper who believes in Russian collusion in our elections. He's part of House leadership who has killed pro-gun legislation for years, and he is pocketing the money from gun owners through the Minnesota Gun Owners PAC. He's pocketing that cash and marching around trying to tell gun owners how pro-gun he is. Shame, shame, shame. Guys, let me know what you think about that. I think it's ridiculous. Again, I couldn't make this up. If somebody paid me big money, hey, come up with a great story about Minnesota Republicans who believe in Russian collusion and are siphoning money from gun owners. I go, I don't know how to do that. But I didn't have to. All I had to do was look on Google. All I have to do is watch the news and watch the Star Tribune as they run stories about Representative Jim Nash, who is just another Republican wimp, as he's been called by the ladies of the deplorable housewives of the Midwest. And all the truth, all the facts are right there. Jim Nash is no pro-gun champion. No, he's a pro-gun sham. He's a sham. He's a hoax is what he is, a hoax. When it comes to gun rights, that guy, he'll never pass stand your ground law because it's his best platform to run on. At election time, he lives in such a pro-gun district, Jim Nash will spend the rest of his life, if he can get away with it, if the bill never passes, if he can kill stand your ground law, Jim Nash will spend the rest of his days going door to door telling everybody how he's pro-gun, how he's the sponsor for stand your ground law, and he will introduce stand your ground for 4 more decades if he can get away with it and never get it passed. It's absolutely outrageous. It's outrageous. And you know what? They're no friend of gun owners. And that's why Minnesota Gun Rights is here. That's why we're pointing this stuff out. That's why we're laying this stuff bare, because gun owners deserve to hear the truth. Gun owners deserve to know why we don't get pro-gun legislation passed here under our current majorities, because of people like Kurt Dowd and Jim Nash. And of course, Sticky Fingers Strasser, can't leave them out, and Rob Dorr. Well, yeah, they put up a good front. They put up a good showing from time to time. But they never intend to actually push the bills, and gun owners pay the price. We think it's shameful. We do not play this way. We do not work this way. We're going to fight for stand your ground law. We're going to fight for constitutional carry. We're going to expose anti-gunners at election time. We're doing it right now. And this is what we do. It's what we do full time. And we're not about to stop now. So, yeah, Andrea says the Russian collusion happened with Hillary and the DNC. They paid for the dossier. Everybody knows that. Come on, Jim. Catch up with the times here. People know how this stuff has happened and how it went down. It's absolutely ridiculous. Guys, that's all I've got for right now. Share this with your pro-gun friends and family, because Jim Nash loves to go around and toot his own horn about how pro-gun he is when we know the facts. We know the facts. Gun owners know the truth. Hey, again, if you want more information on all of this stuff, it's on the link on YouTube right on top of this video, where our director, Chris, my brother, and I walk through specifically with all the paperwork, specific numbers, how these people have been padding their own pockets and working together to kill pro-gun legislation like stand your ground law. It's outrageous. It's outrageous. So share this video. I'm going to hop off here for right now, guys. I'm going to get off. Thank you for joining today. And I'll be back here tomorrow. We have a lot of work yet to do between now and the end of this election season. And we're going to keep calling attention to what's happening, current news, and of course, who the radical anti-gunners are and who the fake pro-gunners are, like Jim Nash. Don't be fooled. Don't be fooled. Jim Nash is no warrior for the Second Amendment. He's a warrior for himself. People like him are always working to advance their own political careers, their own political agendas, and we're just happy today that the wonderful, deplorable housewives of the Midwest drew attention to this. We can see it as well about the collusion between Jim Nash and the left to come on, Russian collusion and Donald Trump. I mean, come on, you got to be kidding me. Cody says, "Long live the Second Amendment." I couldn't say it better. With that, I'm gonna sign off, and we're gonna keep pushing here. So thank you for joining me. Please share this video, and I will be back tomorrow with more updates. And we're going to have more updates in the field here very shortly. We're going to be dropping targeted districts, making sure people know who's pro-gun, who's anti-gun. And we're going to have updates from out on the sidewalks. So we'll see you guys. Have a fantastic rest of your week, and I will talk to you tomorrow. God bless.